There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that?
I promise you we'll be able to do it.
Who sabotaged the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
The Russians.
It's not correct.
Well, there's no journalists who come to Syria.
No.
Well, tell me what your story is then. What do you think? What is? Tell me what
Okay,
the.
finish.
No, but tell me what do you think is? What is the lie that's being told? What do you think is not
You
being
lie
told?
because you are talking truth, not truth about the Syria.
So
Syria
what is
is
the
very
truth?
quiet.
What is?
The truth is that nothing we have in Syria. Syria is very quiet. And everybody in population in Syria loves our president and we support the president. But you are talking the very lie about Syria.
Dear American people, we the Syrian people salute you and urge you to stand for what is right for both of our countries. We urge you to help you in safeguarding America and safeguarding the world from terrorism and terrorists worldwide. Syria has never exported a terrorist to the world. The Syrians are the oldest people on earth with a culture that extends in time, older than history itself. We were until 2011 the most secular, the most stable Arab country in the Middle East. A ravaging attack from Al-Qaeda terrorists supported by Wahhabi Saudis and some weak-minded Syrians who believe their lies and ideology has left our countries in ruins. Please take a stand today against your president through your Congress and stand against Al-Qaeda in Syria just like we stood against them when they attacked you in 9/11. Terrorism knows no color, it knows no creed, and your administration is funding it actively and arming it with your tax money. The Syrian government through the last 3 years has been painted in the media as the devil. They have demonized it and the Syrian army far enough to accuse an army of a nation that it uses chemical weapons against its own people. The Syrian army is the most honorable institution in Syria, and Syrians are what make up the Syrian army. Unlike the terrorist groups known as the Free Syrian Army and Jabhat al-Nusra, which are made up of Afghans, Libyans, Tunisians, the Taliban, and terrorist fundamentalists from around the world, they are the ones who launched the chemical attack. They are the ones your president wants to support in overtaking the Syrian country. Please wake up and face those horrid truths, and take responsibility towards humanity, and do not allow your administration to attack a country that never posed a threat to you or has never attacked you, and off of his own soldiers is sacrificing to protect you. The Syrians are donating their blood today to protect America's best interest. Please write to your congressman. Show your support for your own national security and for your fellow humans in Syria. We thank you, and may God bless our homelands.
I'm an American, born and raised in the U.S. I had a patriotic history. I was married to a U.S. Marine Corps officer. I grew up with a love for my country. I was working as a school teacher when I became involved with Syria. My story, I guess, started around 2012. I was living in a college town. I ended up with a roommate from Turkey. Having him as a roommate and his friends that were around him that were also attending the university, I was able to begin having conversations with people from other places that I had never had before. I was married to a military officer during the Iraq War, and all I had ever heard was that we were heroes. We had gone over, freed the people from a brutal dictator, and all of the people were better off. And now all of a sudden, I was sitting across the table at dinner with people from Turkey who were telling me that my country came into a place that was thriving with business and prosperity and demolished it. And I remember that my roommate said, "There is no Iraq anymore. It's only the demolished territory of the United States." About a year later, I had a different roommate from Turkey. When the Gezi Park protests broke out in May 2013, the Turkish government came in with force and attacked the unarmed citizens for holding up signs in peaceful protest, asking the government not to tear down their historical parks to build shopping malls and mosques. My Turkish roommate and her friends made protest signs at my house. They began sharing their story and asking for help on social media. Many of the Turkish students changed their profile pictures to gas masks. Our media was silent. So, just a few months later, when our government accused the Syrian government of chemically attacking its citizens, and then said that we were partnering with the Turkish government to attack Syria, I knew right away that something about the story was wrong. My Turkish roommate began telling me that the things we were hearing about President Assad in Syria were not correct. She began telling me that she wished that they had a moderate president in Turkey. She began showing me pictures of the First Lady of Syria and how she was uncovered. Her hair was uncovered, her face was uncovered. She was very westernized. She was walking through streets, hugging children, loving on them. The people were celebrating the president and his wife walking through the street. But then when we came to understand that my government and the Turkish government were partnering with the Saudi Arabian government with all the many covered wives, we began to see that where the extremism was not in Syria. Syria was the moderate. It was the Renaissance among all of them.
I am an American with roots from Southeast Europe and Middle East, North Africa, and I have had the pleasure of visiting Syria twice since the beginning of the war. I had many, many friends and some loved ones in Syria during the course of the war. I first became aware that there was a problem in Syria during what I like to call the fake Arab Spring. I actually lost a relative in Libya during the course of the fake Arab Spring. And because I saw what was happening in Libya, I knew that what was happening in Syria was a lie. Immediately, I knew that it was a dirty war on Syria. and that all of the mainstream media was lying.
The way corporate media has reported on Syria is to choose only a small segment of society that supports the NATO narrative and ignore the vast population living in government-secured areas because their voices don't align with the NATO narrative. From the beginning, this was an orchestrated war on Syria. It's not something that just went awry. It was premeditated. I'll begin by showing two clips. This is Lily and Stephen Sayuni, and I met them in April 2014 on my first trip to Syria.
Like when you're saying it's a when they say call themselves peaceful, you do not go burn places, you do not burn shops, you do not burn people's cars. And the Syrian security forces had orders from the Syrian president that to not use a gun. They had only sticks in their hand only. And tens of Syrian police, Syrian security forces were knifed, stabbed, and beaten by either by knives or rocks or sticks. And some of them have died.
So I have a background in research, and I went to Syria 3 times during the war. If you understand one war that empire is waging, you can understand other wars. Right now, people in this country, a lot of them do not have an understanding of what is really happening in Ukraine, and that it's a continuum of empire's devastation of the world in the name of humanitarian warfare. Of course, there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. It's a big lie. But they're using the same tactics that they use in Syria, and they're still using them in Syria. And empire is lying to its own people also, because it's impoverishing its own people. What empire wants to do is just lie about everything so that it can loot and pillage.
I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. And then we attacked Afghanistan. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
This war in Syria was a U.S. NATO-led war. And it was coordinated also out of Israel and from the Golan Heights. We have ample documents that these were paid killers, okay? And that the terrorists are, in fact, a creation of the U.S. government. The recruitment of these terrorists is undertaken by NATO and the Turkish High Command in coordination with Washington, the Gulf states, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, where they actually train them, and so on. So we are dealing here with what we will call state sponsors of terrorism.
And people have a hard time maybe accepting the fact that what their government tells them about these wars is basically the opposite to what is really happening. On my first trip there, I went to the Minister of Reconciliation. One of the things he says, well, yeah, sure, you give weapons to one group, but the next day they're in the hands of the other group. That's one way in which the West tries to disguise its hand. They call some moderate and some not moderate, and the one group will deliver weapons to the other group. So when ISIS was operating and occupying oil fields, where did the oil go? Well, it went to Turkey, which is a member of NATO, and that's where all the terrorists came through because there's a big porous border. They came right through Turkey. One journalist was murdered because she figured that out. So Turkey's buying the oil. Afghanistan didn't attack us, and Afghanistan was attacked. I mean, none of these countries attacked us. I mean, now the truth is coming out, but now that liberated areas are, now that the devastation is there, and some of us are on the ground, Vanessa Beeley, Eva Bartlett, Tim Anderson, Janice Kortkamp. I was there, and I hope to go back. We're taking pictures, and they see these huge arsenals of weaponry, all NATO weaponry that ISIS and the other terrorists left behind in their rush to leave. So the evidence, primary source evidence, is overwhelming.
April the 1st of 2011 was the first day that I read a report online in the Los Angeles Times detailing a so-called peaceful protest in Latakia which had turned violent, and I responded to the author of that article, found her on Facebook, and I discussed this with her because all of her details were wrong. She had lied throughout the whole report because I live here, and that day was a Friday, and I had been all over the town on various chores. So I had been in every spot shopping or visiting or doing something that she had reported on, and none of those details in her report were true. She admitted that she lived in Beirut, had never been to Latakia, and had heard these rumors. They had been told to her by others. The others, I must assume, they were opposition activists that knew where she lived in Beirut and knew she was a journalist for the Los Angeles Times, and they fed her this false information. So she published it. She then told me to contact her editor by email, and that she would love to have an private interview with me to get the true details. I wrote to her editor 5 times, never replied.
You are not telling the truth.
I became aware of the chemical weapons attack through the media, just like everyone else had in 2013. I believe it was September 14th when the Pope called for an international day of prayer and fasting for Syria because our Congress was about to take a vote on whether or not to missile strike the country. So I spent that day in prayer and fasting. And before I went to bed that night, I was sitting at a coffee shop and I received an email from my friend who had previously lived in my home and was now back in Turkey. And he said, take a look at this. And he sent me a video of a UN inspector report that was saying that the UN inspectors came to Syria to investigate the situation, and that they found that the weapons could not have been launched from the government side. In their report, they were stating that the weapons were launched from the rebel side. I thought, well, that's very interesting. And I closed it up. And I decided, as I was leaving the coffee shop, to go and check my 2 senators' pages to see whether or not they were going to vote for the missile strike. My first senator, I checked his page, and he had written a statement saying that he was going to vote against missile striking Syria. The second senator, I went to her page, and she had written that it was a big decision and she was undecided. And underneath her quote, and underneath every post on her page, hundreds, if not thousands, of Syrians had written in. They had written comments all over her page asking us to help. They were saying that our media was lying, their president did not attack them, and that our government was arming flesh-eating, cannibalistic rebels who were devouring them. They were saying that if we missile struck their army and took out their president and continued arming what they considered Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra terrorists, they stated that they would all be dead. Some were saying they were getting ready to flee. Some were saying their bags were packed. They were trying to get out of the country. They were afraid of our war. I copied probably 50 to 100 of these posts and posted them on my own page.
to show the people on my friends list what I found. And then I began talking to them.
It started the second year of my studying. It was 2011. Their first was a demonstration against Assad. They were asking for freedom, but we never know what kind of freedom they were talking about. The war started in 2012, when civilians started to have arms and fight with the police. Before this, the people didn't have weapons. We believe the weapons had been sent as early as 2011. There were underground arms dealers. It was an alliance from the US and Gulf to destroy our country. There was a lot of media putting oil on the fire, especially media from the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. I was in my house in Homs. I heard a lot of noise in the street. There was some shooting. We heard someone in the mosque saying, "Go kill the minorities, go wage jihad." This was being said on the loudspeaker. Go kill the infidel. I sat down in my house and continued watching the news. It was in the night. The news was saying, stay in your home, don't go out, take care of your neighbors. The next day, there were people in the streets saying they loved Assad. There were people yelling they hated Assad. I couldn't go out. I stayed in the house about 15 days. After the protesters clashed with the police, they became very radical and very violent. They started to look like Al-Qaeda. They started the Free Syrian Army. Then one day, Assad ordered the army out of the city, so the city was empty of any kind of security. When the army left, the FSA started killing the civilians of Syria.
I told them that I was listening and they could tell me whatever it was they were trying to say. The Syrians began sending me information in droves. Every single day, they were sending me tons and tons and tons of information. I had photos of beheadings in my inbox. I had video footage of people being chopped to pieces, roadblocks where our Nusra rebels were stopping traffic, armed with assault rifles and military-grade weapons, and taking people out of their vehicles and putting them on their knees, tying them their hands behind their backs, and then taking out machetes and sawing them into little pieces. There was grotesque, gory images and videos, people being dragged behind vehicles. These were not polished. These were not something that our media purchased. These were very real, raw footage. These were things that had been filmed on someone's phone, and they were being sent to me.
For years and years, terrorists in Eastern Ghouta, the Eastern Ghouta that Western media was crying over, were mortaring Damascus and Damascus outskirts areas, and maiming and killing children like these. So these are children I met in the Damascus University Hospital. The child on the top photo was in critical condition. She was 3 years old. And now that Ghouta has been liberated, Damascus civilians can walk in the street late at night without fear. And kids can go to school, and parents don't have to worry about their kids being wiped off the earth by these terrorist bombings.
They like to use the word brutal dictator. Every time empire wants to destroy a prey country so that they can loot and pillage, it presents this image of the leader as a brutal dictator. Now, I met him, and he is not a brutal dictator. He's very well-spoken, sophisticated. He's actually an eye doctor. And he has widespread support from Syrian people. And the media, it gives distorted views of anti-Assad protests prior to the war. But there were people protesting, as they do in any country. That's what you're supposed to be able to do. But they were peaceful. And on the other side, there were pro-Assad rallies, which were huge.
We know that in 2013, the Joint Chiefs of Staff became so distraught about the prospect that Al-Qaeda might take Damascus that they ordered a thorough study by the Defense Intelligence Agency. This was done, and DIA rendered formal findings of fact. One of the findings of fact was that for all practical purposes, there are no moderate rebels. They do not exist. The other thing that they found is that this channel that we had established ostensibly to provide weapons to moderate rebels, it was being run by the Central Intelligence Agency, and they said it had evolved into a system where we supplied all rebels indiscriminately, and they explicitly mentioned that we were supplying ISIS and we were supplying Al-Qaeda. And they may have called it al-Nusra, but that is Al-Qaeda in Syria.
I tell you what the Syrian people say. They have what we have. They kidnapped the children and men from the villages of Latakia, and they brought them here, put them in one place, and used chemical weapons against them. That's the story that the villagers in these villages know.
I was sent news reports from Syria that debunked the claim that the chemical weapons had come from President Assad. I had actually live footage of terrorists launching chemical weapons. Professors at MIT began debunking the theory. They began saying that they studied the ballistics and these weapons were launched from the rebel side.
Chemical weapons has been an issue that's been reiterated over the years, always at times when it's supremely inconvenient for the Syrian army to have used a chemical gas or weapon on the people, when they've been winning by standard military tactics, and when, by all rights, they know that it will bring on the wrath of the Western world. It's highly illogical that they would use chemical weapons. But in any case, back to The Guardian, this is The Guardian, Karim, again in Istanbul, pushing the lie, frankly, that in Duma, a chemical gas or even a nerve agent was used. They said symptoms which included frothing at the mouth, suffocation, dilated and constricted pupils, blah, 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 blah. These are all symptoms of sarin gas, is what The Guardian was claiming. And yet, as we all, I'm sure you're aware, France, the UK, the US bombed Syria illegally before OPCW chemical weapons inspectors could actually do their job. And this was later used, again, this is The Guardian, to call for military intervention in Syria, this chemical weapons lie.
We're in Duma, we're walking around, we're talking to people. I understand there are accusations that some of the people that are being talked to are plants. They're people that are set up to say certain things in support of President Assad, and they're not real. So we're walking up to random people at this point, asking them questions and what they think about this situation.
بس ما شفنا لا شفت كيماوي ولا شفت حدا مصاب حتى بكيماوي.
He haven't seen, he haven't smelled, and he haven't anyone hurt.
No one hurt.
Chemical attack.
So, what do you think happened?
شو بتعتقد هي شغلة تمثيلية شغلة؟
هلا على الأغلب هي تمثيلية المسلح.
He thinks it's a play or show.
So it's a lie.
It's a lie, yes.
It never happened.
كذبة.
We're about one block away from where the attack allegedly happened. We're going to go see it in one moment, but right now we're walking through the streets, basically at what would be ground zero if the attack happened. Right now, it's not clear if it even did. I've interviewed 20 people so far who live here in this area and who say they were there that day and they didn't see anything. They didn't hear anything. They didn't smell anything. They don't know anyone who was injured. They've never heard of that. They did see it on TV. They heard about it on TV, but from personal eyewitness accounts, no one has seen anything so far.
This is the hospital room in question. If you've seen the videos claiming there was a chemical attack in Douma and that people were being hosed down, this is the room in question. And this was a medical student who works at that hospital. So he talks about the fact that there were no symptoms, contrary to what the Guardian claimed from Istanbul, that there were no symptoms of any chemical attack amongst the patients that they were treating.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have the pleasure today to introduce to you the delegation of the U.S. Peace Council, led by my distinguished friend Alfred, and the distinguished members of the delegation. They are here today to brief you on their latest visit to Damascus recently and to Syria.
I'm Alfred Martyr, and I'm president of the U.S. Peace Council. It was quite evident to us over the several years that what we were hearing and reading from the press was obviously confusing the American people and the peace movement, the large, vocal anti-war movement that exists in our country.
Our delegation came to Syria with political views and assumptions, but we were determined to be skeptics and to doubt everything, to meet everyone we could, and to confirm or disconfirm received opinion and establish conventional wisdom, and to follow the facts wherever they led us. I concluded a number of things from the trip. The motive, in my opinion, of the U.S. war is to destroy an independent Arab secular state. It's the last secular Arab state standing, and it wants a client regime, like Libya, like Iraq, like a number of other countries you could mention. The U.S. hostility to independent Syria long precedes 2011, the beginning of the war. The U.S., I concluded, claims to be against ISIS terrorism, but yet it's been loath to fight a really consistent fight against terrorism. Certain privileged groups, such as the al-Nusra Front, the names shift, are called moderate rebels because they fight the Syrian government, and the U.S. wants that. They are not moderate. They beheaded a 12-year-old boy when we were there.
Where does this perception that Assad is so brutal come from? Why has the media or the West or whoever's responsible, why have they targeted Assad?
They want to overthrow him. They want to put someone that they can easily control, that they can tell him what to do, when to do, whenever they want. And Assad is not that kind of person. So that's why they are against him. And the mainstream media has played a very huge role with the propaganda and with the lies about Syria. First of all, they said that what is happening in Syria is a civil war. It's a lie. It's not a civil war. What's happening in Syria is that the Syrian army, which are people that come from every religion and every city and every ethnic background. This is the Syrian army. Syrian army are not all Bashar al-Assad's friends or homies. They come from all the cities and all the religions in Syria, and they're all fighting together, united. They're fighting Islamic extremist terrorist groups. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Islam. And these terrorist groups are funded by outsiders. They're funded by Turkey. They're funded by Saudi Arabia. They're funded by Qatar, by America, by England, by France. That's why they are very strong. The reason they are strong is not because they have public support. Nobody in Syria supports these barbarians. But the reason they are strong is because of the endless flow of money and weapons that are always reaching them by outside governments.
I'd like to play a clip from Dara. I went to Dara in May 2018, before Dara was liberated of the terrorists occupying Dar al-Balad and other parts of the greater area of Dara city. And it's notable that Dara is the place where we're told the so-called revolution began in Syria. So when I went there, I was really interested to talk with people about what life was like in those early days.
It was Al Jazeera breaking news from the very same hospital we were at. I was okay. So it was the first piece of news on breaking news. Al Salamin Hospital, it doesn't admit any civilian injuries.
Wow.
And it was repeated, their way to repeat the news every single minute. It was on this, breaking news. And it was repeated and repeated. We were, what? We were there, and everyone was getting the proper medical service.
The other part of this that I think people in the United States need to know is that the Assad government provides free health care, free universal health care to everyone. It's a mission, it's part of the government's mission. Free education for everyone from primary school all the way through even to university and medical school. And we met with one person, when we met with this one particular person from the nonviolent opposition, we asked him, well, tell us, what are some of your grievances with the Assad government? And he said, well, you just heard that it costs about $50 a year for people going to medical school. We think that's too high. He was being somewhat facetious, of course, but these are the kinds of policies that our citizens here in the United States are calling for.
I do comedy. I started doing comedy in Arabic in bars and in clubs and stuff like that. Then, the Syrian war started, and I started looking at the news in general, like the mainstream media. I started seeing that everything they're reporting about in Syria is a lie. So I was like, I am in Syria, I have a platform, why don't I use it to spread the truth about my country? I was living in Etsaya, and it's a place in West Ghouta, and I would see the mainstream media saying that Assad is throwing rockets and throwing missiles on the civilian people of Etsaya, while I would be sitting in Etsaya and nothing is happening.
The Assad government has been legitimately elected 3 times in a row now, and I'm very proud to have last visited Syria during the most recent presidential election. I was there and I saw everything with my own eyes. President Assad was legitimately elected for the 3rd time by 95.1%. This sort of result is not seen anywhere else in the world. No government is perfect, but what I know is that Syria loves President Assad. And if it had not been for President Assad, Syria definitely would have fallen victim to the extremist black flags.
I'm a Syrian citizen, lived in the United States for about 30 years. I'm here in Damascus to exercise my rights, my duty as a Syrian citizen since the U.S. chose to close our embassies. As long as the embassies are closed, we're going to keep making a trip here to exercise our duty and our democratic rights. As you can see, we have 3 choices today. 3 choices. Everyone here has the right to choose whoever he wants. I am going to vote today. So I will be shortly showing my ID. They're going to have to look it up, make sure I'm a Syrian citizen and that I haven't voted yet. I will take the card and I'm going to go inside the room where I can place my vote, put it in an envelope, and then return it back here. And we'll be doing that shortly.
What's happening at this table here?
They are verifying the names. They are taking the names down and verifying that you are not voting more than once.
Whether they like it or not, the majority of the Syrian people support Bashar al-Assad. We've known that under the Obama administration, America was funding ISIS, and they were sending weapons to Islamic terrorist groups, and they were lying to their people. They were telling them that we're sending weapons to moderate fighters. And the irony is in the word, how can you be a moderate and at the same time be a fighter? You know, if you're a moderate, you would have a political party, a political opposition, you would put new rules, suggest a change in the constitution or whatever. But the people we are fighting are people that want to implement Sharia law in Syria. If ISIS or Al-Qaeda win in Syria, Syria will become an Islamic state like Saudi Arabia.
Isn't it a fact that the global jihadist movement is very closely linked to the teachings of Wahhabism? Yes or no?
Yeah, I would say they draw inspiration in a perverted sense, but yes, I would say, and Robert may want to elaborate on that. But the two big global jihadists are Al Qaeda and ISIL.
And they draw their inspiration from the Wahhabi strain of Islam. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the Wahhabism is a 18th century offshoot of Sunni Islam, which began in the land that has come to be known as Saudi Arabia. Isn't that correct? And Wahhabism seeks to purify Islam by getting rid of a number of human behaviors and practices that it considers to be sins against Allah. Correct?
Correct.
And Wahhabism is a strict, fundamentalist, highly intolerant strain of Islam. Correct?
Yeah.
Correct? And now, isn't it a fact that the Saudi ruling monarchy derives its legitimacy by reliance on the ideology of Wahhabism?
You want to?
The Saudis are riding a tiger. The Saudis are riding a tiger.
So if you will answer
what
my
I'm
question,
saying,
isn't it a fact?
No, I wouldn't put it that way. I would say it's not a fact that they depend solely on Wahhabism for their legitimacy. They derive legitimacy from a variety of things. One of them is Wahhabism, but it is not the only one.
Well, is it fair to say that Wahhabism is the state-sponsored religion of Saudi Arabia?
Yes, the Saudi government sanctions Wahhabi imams in their major mosques.
You will start hearing homosexuals being killed in the street. You will start hearing that the penalty for apostasy is death. You will start hearing of women getting stoned to death for committing adultery. All this stuff in Syria, we don't have it. We don't have it. We have people that have the freedom to do whatever they want. If you, like I said, if you want to be a religious Muslim, you can go to the mosque, you can go to the church, you can go to the bar, you can go to the nightclub. It's your decision. You have the freedom to choose the lifestyle you want to live.
What was the latest amount of arms that we sold to Saudi Arabia? The latest shipment, I think it was $100 million worth of arms?
Well, there's support for the campaign in Yemen, but the arms sales that occur periodically are in the billions of dollars.
I think many people have seen this image, which dates back to June of last year. It's when the alleged Islamic State convoy crossed the desert from Syria into Iraq, And ultimately, this in itself subsequently justified the bombing campaign under humanitarian mandate, supported by Western countries, to go in and bomb, to carpet bomb, not to bomb them, okay? Not to bomb IS, but to bomb the infrastructure of Iraq and Syria. Just tell me, here we have a Toyota pickup trucks convoy, okay? With all due respect to Toyota, absolutely wonderful cars. But people who know anything about Air Force deployments and smart bombing, this is a piece of cake. They could have been wiped out in a matter of hours, okay? I mean, anybody who wishes to refute that, the IS convoy from Syria into Iraq, crossing 200 kilometers of desert. And we will recall Operation Desert Storm in 1991, the retreating Iraqi armed forces, which was decimated. It was a criminal operation by the United States. But here we have the terrorists, and they say we can't get hold of them, we can't do anything, we can't catch them. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a military expert either, we can ask Dr. Barnett, but they could have been knocked off very easily, piece of cake. And why did they not do it? Well, they didn't do it because they're financing them, they're equipping them, they're advising them, they're training them in Saudi Arabia, and they are sending in their mercenary killers integrated by US and Allied special forces into Iraq, and they're using this as a pretext to wage a bombing campaign, including against Syria.
The military bases that America, UK, and France strike are all military bases that the Syrian army uses to strike these jihadists. So the only people that really were happy of this strike are the jihadists, are the ISIS members, are the Al-Qaeda members. And today I saw a video in CNN. They were interviewing a Syrian citizen, and he was telling them, we were so happy that Trump struck us. We were so grateful that he did that. And I call BS. There is nobody in this whole world that will be happy when a foreign country strikes his own country. Only somebody that is not patriotic will be happy, will be celebrating that, oh my God, UK, France, and America are striking us and are bombing us. It's a lie.
Almost every Syrian has a family member, sometimes more than one, in the Syrian army. The Syrian army protects the Syrian people. And the Syrian army is responsible for protecting the rest of the world from terrorism and extremism. This is something that people really need to understand. The Assad government and the Syrian Arab army protect Syria from terrorism and protect the rest of the world from these extremists as well. And everyone in the world should be thanking the Syrian army and regarding them as heroes, because that is what they are.
Syria is a secular government, and a lot of people ask me, what do you mean by secular government? A secular government is a government that treats all its people equally, regardless of their religion and ethnic background.
A lot of the perception in the media, especially in the West, is that President Assad is totally against having this kind of open society that you've described, that the different religions, Christians, Druze, Jews, Muslims, they can't live together because Assad won't let them. But just being here, even for a day now, I go outside and there's a church on the corner, and then there's a mosque next to it, and there's another church, and there's priests walking down the street, and everything works. Everyone gets along.
This is another area. This is in Homs. It's called Al-Zahra, and this was subjected to numerous car and suicide bombings. And this was in December 2015. I went there a couple days after a car and suicide bombing, and the human suffering there was immense. And so I did write a long article about the hypocrisy of corporate media in not covering these kind of issues. The corporate media, when they did address Al-Zahra, they would call it an Alawite area, or a government-held area. But as I wrote, in reality, it's a district comprising a majority of Alawites, but also significant numbers of Christians, Sunnis, and Shias, many of whom are internally displaced people that went there for safety, seeking shelter. And they came from other provinces, even Aleppo and Idlib. And so by depicting Zahra simply as an Alawite area, is their sectarian project. And sectarianism is something most Syrians I've encountered in now 11 trips to Syria since 2014, they reject it. If you talk to Syrians, they'll talk about celebrating one another's festivals with each other. And Vanessa was in Aleppo this past year over Christmas. And Aleppo is predominantly Sunni. And they had massive Christmas displays, a massive Christmas tree. So this sectarianism is solely from the outside. There might be a small number of these fundamentalists, but normal Syrians of all faiths reject it. But it's been a project of the corporate media.
Prof. Tim Anderson, he went and interviewed a military figure, and he describes in detail how Western military warplanes directly supported ISIS, slaughtered Syrian soldiers who were trying to defeat ISIS, and then the ISIS proxies immediately occupied the territory thanks to the West direct overt support. I went also to Aleppo, into this industrial park, and it was totally destroyed. What happened was the terrorists, Western supported terrorists, went in there and they stole everything that they could steal. They did steal, and it ended up in Turkey, and everything else they destroyed. And they hoarded medicine that was given to them from our governments, and they hoarded food. They launched ordnance filled with explosives and nails and poison gas regularly, all the time, into the parts of Aleppo that were not occupied. And when people tried to leave through these corridors, which the terrorists mined, they were shot. So people couldn't leave. They were totally captive. And they create jail cells in the hospital building, and they put victims in the jail cells, and they torture them there, and they execute people. And they have sniper perches on the top of the hospitals often. So these hospitals are used as command posts, as torture centers, Sharia law courts. That's where they hoard food and medicine. That's often the base from which these terrorists operate. So the goal here is to help empire destroy infrastructure, destroy the country. So sometimes the support is overt, sometimes the support is covert. Always what you're reading in the mainstream media is a lie.
Because I'm sure you're all aware that the Syrian government is accused of starving its people. But one thing I'd like you to note is that the location of the reporters. So one of their star reporters, Karim Shaheen, is usually in Istanbul. This time he happened to be in Dubai, but he's not in Syria. And they're also relying on aid organizations or on activists for their information on Madaya, in not only Madaya, but also Aleppo. In 2016, Vanessa Beeley, my colleague, was in Aleppo as it was being liberated of Al-Qaeda, Al-Zinki, and other terrorist factions. And amongst her YouTube testimonies, which are on her YouTube channel, she has many with people saying that they were starving us and all the other abuses they were subject to. Even Reuters deigned to admit that rebels had a storage of food. And this was the common theme in all the areas that the corporate media said the Assad regime, quote unquote, is starving the people. In all those areas, it turned out that the terrorists within took all the food aid that was sent in by the Syrian government and by aid agencies. So this is Shadi Shehadeh, and he lost his, I shouldn't say he lost, his wife and his 3 young children were murdered, and his mother were murdered by this terrorist missile attack. So he was clearly still in grief when I spoke with him. And he took me to his children's bedroom and he showed me their belongings. He said they just had a bath when they just had their bath when they were killed. And I'll just play a little bit. This clip is on my YouTube, the longer version, just so you can get a sense of this man's horrible grief that he's enduring. And by the way, these terrorists would send them video messages saying that they planned on sending more, very sadistic messages, psychologically terrorizing the civilians in this town.
وقت استشهدوا عند قائم حمام هذا لاسوسي سنين الصغيري هذا رفادي هاي ماريا هاي رسومات ماريا هاي رسومات عود هو بيلعب بالحرب هذول أغراض الحرب هاي برد هاي شنتايد فادي هاي شنتايد السينما هاي العكس هاي شنتايد ماريا كانت هي مؤمنة دائما تروح على الكنيسة. قبل بيومين كان عيد ميلاده لعمر 6 سنين. هاي صورة عيد ميلاده. هذا هو الولد. هاي صورة عيد ميلاد. هاي العيلة كلها. كل سنة احنا بنوجه بس انه رسالة انه الشعب ينظر معنا يعني يشوف ان حالتنا انه احنا عم نتعذب كثير اهل محري عم نتعذب لدرجة ما توصف. هذا ابني وبنتي 3. هذا 1 2 3 ديلي وهذا خيي. دول 3 ديلي كلتهم خيي.
I will name the United States of America. We are dealing with a criminal undertaking at a global level. We're talking about millions of casualties tied into US-led wars since the end of World War II, during the period which is euphemistically called the post-war era. There is an ongoing war. It is led by the United States. It may be carried out by a number of proxy countries which are obeying orders from Washington. And I should stress, and this will be the main thrust of my presentation today, the global war on terrorism is a US undertaking which is fake. It's based on fake premises. It tells us that somehow America and the Western world are going after a fictitious enemy, the Islamic State, when in fact the Islamic State is fully supported and financed by the Western military alliance and America's allies in the Persian Gulf, and Turkey and Israel. How do we know that? Because it's been acknowledged by the Israeli media back in 2011, DEPCA, Intelligence News, that the actual recruitment of the Mujahideen was undertaken under NATO auspices in collaboration with the Turkish High Command.
When America was in Syria in the Obama days, ISIS was expanding. This is a fact, you can check it out. As soon as the Russian intervention started, ISIS started shrinking. And I'll tell you the difference between the Russian intervention and the American intervention. The Russian intervention was invited personally from the Syrian government. The Syrian government asked Russia to intervene and help out in Syria. But the Syrian government didn't ask America to intervene in Syria, and the American government just forced themselves inside Syria. So there is a difference. So I think my message to the American people is for them to wake up, to do their research, to not trust the mainstream media.
The fake Syrian civil defense first unofficially appeared in terrorist-held areas in Syria in 2013. These terrorists were able to acquire their equipment through the killing of the real Syrian civil defense. In 2014, they were officially taken under the wing of James Lemessier of the British firm Mayday Rescue. And by mid-2015, they were regularly appearing in videos, often clean-shaven, with freshly cut hair, wearing UK-supplied uniforms, while the UK further promoted the Aleppo Media Center, AMC, narratives and fed them to the media. The Aleppo Media Center has acted as a propaganda launderer and allows affiliated governments and partners plausible deniability for any direct responsibility for the nefarious actions related to the terrorist ruses. The United States government is also on record stating that they supplied the White Helmets with $23 million in funding. Around the time that Russia entered the conflict and started destroying ISIS convoys and positions in August 2015, the White Helmets were being promoted in the Western media as the humanitarian thesis to Russia's barrel-bombing antithesis. Like a scene out of Orwell's masterpiece 1984, the Al-Qaeda terrorists that belonged to the groups that conducted the official story 9/11 attacks had become the good guys, and those that destroyed the terrorists were labeled as Putin or Assad apologists and Russian trolls. This US and UK deep state propaganda campaign culminated in the US media company Netflix promoting a movie about the White Helmets which portrayed them as heroic angels on a humanitarian mission to save small children. This was followed with a propaganda campaign led by The Guardian UK and members of the British media, which advocated for the White Helmets being nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. On February 26, 2017, Hollywood presented the White Helmet Netflix propaganda piece an Oscar Academy Award. The terrorists really have won when the government and media embraces them and lies openly to the public.
This is the new way that empire works. They corrupt agencies. Now, none of these so-called non-governmental agencies are non-governmental. They're all governmental. They're funded by the government and foundations. And there's a revolving door often between the board of directors and the State Department.
Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, their primary source of information is Al-Qaeda, White Helmet.
So what we have here is this whole complex of non-governmental agencies, Amnesty International, Avaz. They're all governmental. They're all embedded with the terrorists, and they're supported by foundation money as well. And they are the source for our mainstream media stories.
Let's start with your second question. So, international organizations on the ground. Tell me which ones are on the ground in eastern Aleppo. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you, there are none. There are none. These organizations are relying on the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Coventry, UK, and which is one man. They're relying on compromised groups like the White Helmets, which, let's talk about the White Helmets. The White Helmets were founded in 2013 by a British ex-military officer. They have been funded to the tune of $100 million by the US, UK, and Europe and other states. They purport to be rescuing civilians in eastern Aleppo and Idlib, yet no one in eastern Aleppo has heard of them. And I say no one, bearing in mind that now 95% of these areas of eastern Aleppo are liberated. The White Helmets purport to be neutral, yet they can be found carrying guns and standing on the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. And their video footage actually contains children that have been recycled in different reports. So you can find a girl named Aya who turns up in a report in month, say, August, and she turns up in the next month in 2 different locations. So they are not credible. The SOHR is not credible. Unnamed activists are not credible. Once or twice, maybe, but every time, not credible. So your sources on the ground, you don't have them. As for your agenda, not your, but the agenda of some corporate media, it is the agenda of regime change. How can the New York Times, I was reading it this morning, or how can Democracy Now!, which I was reading the other day, maintain until this day that this is a civil war in Syria? How can they maintain until this day that that the protests were unarmed and nonviolent until, say, 2012? That is absolutely not true. How can they maintain that the Syrian government is attacking civilians in Aleppo when every person that's coming out of these areas occupied by terrorists is saying the opposite? So that's with regards to your question on lying Western media. How do I quantify the support of the Syrian people? The elections. In 2014, the Syrian people held elections. The voter turnout was 88%, including people in Lebanon, where I was during the elections in Lebanon, which were actually ran for 2 days, extended hours, people walking for kilometers to reach the embassy, including people who flew from their own countries like mine, which has criminally shut the Syrian embassy so that Syrian people have no rights, and including people within Syria who braved a torrent of terrorist mortars and missiles on election day. And yet, voter turnout rate was something like 88%, I believe. And the election, the results were 78, I believe. I think
Tim Anderson gives you the opposite.
Okay, I might get the turnout wrong. So the results.
74 was the participation.
74 participate, 88. Okay. Anyway, the point being, overwhelmingly, the people support President Assad. That's based on elections, based on my own travels. Okay, so that's subjective. But as I said, I've traveled around Syria, talked with people of all faiths, all walks of life, and there are people that want change in the government. We're not pretending they don't want change. Everybody wants change. But in terms of support of the government, the point is they don't see President Assad as the problem. They see the problem as terrorism. They see elements of problems in the system that they have there. But President Assad, they don't see as the problem. They actually overwhelmingly support him. So I'm basing it on their choice in their leader, and I'm basing it on my interactions with people in Syria and Lebanon.
The latest mainstream media child exploitation tool, little 7-year-old Bana Al-Abed, who quite suddenly, during the Russian and Syrian armed forces' liberation of Aleppo, became famous on Twitter and throughout the corrupt media in September 2016, and whose father is a member of the Islamic jihadist terror groups that make up the anti-government Western-backed FSA opposition in Syria. The whole Al-Abad family posed for a photo shoot with Turkish President Recep Erdogan in December 2016, after Aleppo was liberated from the terrorist factions by the Russian and Syrian armed forces. Little Bana's mother, Fatima, also has terrorist connections, and friends of the family have been recognized by online researchers as being directly linked to the Noor al-Zinki terrorists that beheaded a 12-year-old Palestinian boy on camera in July 2016. These same child beheaders are also affiliated with the US and UK media-promoted reporter Mahmoud Raslan. Raslan was promoted by Western media outlets as the photographer who took the now infamous picture of Amran, another media-exploited child left unattended in the back of an ambulance in September 2016. Weeks later, Mahmoud Raslan was captured on camera taking photographs and leisurely hanging out with the Noor al-Zinki terrorists who beheaded 12-year-old Abdullah Isa in the back of a truck in July 2016. The BBC even went on record to somewhat defend the killing of the 12-year-old boy as seemingly legitimate by stating that he was a fighter. One of the main Noor al-Zinki beheaders has also been recognized by terrorist trackers as a member of the UK established and supported White Helmets.
My name is Christopher Harrison, also known as Clarity of Signal Online. I'm the person that compiled hundreds, possibly thousands of images of the White Helmets, as well as a large number of videos related to the Syrian war, also to the Ukraine war and the Libyan war primarily. I used to be an anti-war activist. I started a Democratic Underground in 2003. I just wanted to help stop war because I previously served in the U.S. Marines, and I wanted to make sure that my fellow Marines were not being sent to war for deceptive and nefarious purposes. It didn't serve the better interest of the public as a whole. They actually did it to themselves. If one looks at it logically, they posted all their information that was Al-Qaeda related online. Adversely, there was a completely different narrative in the United States. In particular, people like Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes and others, they were portraying them as heroes. So what I did is I considered very logical. I just went on Twitter, I found the lead White Helmet poster, Maj Khalif, and then I researched him on Facebook, found his page there, and then I went ahead and branched out, found his friends, and I started screenshotting their own accounts. And then I placed those online on the Clarity of Signal website with the images as well as first-person videos from the events that they were often affiliated with. And I just let the public do their own thinking as far as what they were looking at, because it appeared to be completely the opposite to what the Western media was portraying the White Helmets as. They were portraying them as heroes, rescuers of little children. However, their own Facebook accounts clearly showed that they had sympathies with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other really extreme terrorist groups, a lot of groups that were actually beheading people. Around that time, I also started White Helmets Exposed on Twitter, and that took off, had about 5,000 followers when Twitter deleted it. Twitter had suddenly taken on FireEye Intelligence and the Digital Forensic Labs branch of the Atlantic Council as moderators of its content, and they determined that White Helmets Exposed was not something that they wanted people to see, which once again just reaffirmed to me that I was on the right path as far as exposing the crimes of our own governments, NATO, and the Atlantic Council organizations.
They claim that the chemical attack happened in Douma. And who was the source? Who told them this story? It was the White Helmets. And we both know that the White Helmets is a group funded by the UK and by America. And they have been exposed many times for staging events. And there are videos, you can find them on the internet, of them staging events, faking stories, pretending that something happened, but it's all a lie. You can see them all. These are the people that told the West that a chemical attack, a chemical weapon was used.
So I'm in Sakba, and these are all items belonging to the group, the White Helmets, so otherwise known as Al-Qaeda's rescuers. And you can see gas masks, a license plate with from Saudi Arabia, White Helmets, the White Helmets jacket, fire extinguisher, more gas masks. Now, I haven't been there yet, but I'm told that the White Helmets headquarters was 200 or less meters from a munitions workshop.
Yes.
This wasn't just a civilian building, a residential building, but it was occupied by the White Helmets. See their logo here? And this was a fire truck belonging to Syria, but they stole it, as they've done elsewhere, as they've stolen ambulances. And all throughout the building, you can see other vehicles over there. There's an ambulance, and then just regular vehicles. And before they left, they burned the entire building, as good neutral rescuers do. I'd like to ask Western journalists to please come here and look what their darling neutral impartial rescuers have been doing in Ghouta. All the time they've been crying for the White Helmets, and White Helmets have been doing the work of terrorists in Syria.
And when the Syrian army entered the liberated areas of eastern Ghouta, they found a building that had a chemical lab, a lab that had chlorine and had chemical materials. And the media, the Syrian media, and even the Russian, they were trying to warn the people outside that we saw we found a building that had chemical weapons and that were using them. And they were trying to tell the people, but your country's mainstream media never reported this. Think of it, why would Assad use chemical weapons now after he liberated 90% of Eastern Ghouta without even using chemical weapons? And second of all, let me just finish. Second of all, why would Assad use chemical weapons a couple of days after Donald Trump was saying that America was going to completely leave Syria very soon? It's not for his own interest. Why would he do that action? It is obviously done by Jaish al-Islam, which is an Islamic terrorist group in Eastern Ghouta and Douma. It was used when they saw that they were losing the war and that America was leaving soon. So they tried to use this. So they used chemical weapons to frame Assad, to force Trump to stay in Syria. He should wake up and he should be aware of the people around him, because not everybody around him is his friend.
The Senate has just voted to give the Obama administration the authority it needs to train and arm members of the Syrian opposition, but not before certain senators voiced some very strong objections.
Sending arms to so-called moderate Islamic rebels in Syria is a fool's errand and will only make ISIS stronger. ISIS rides around in $1 billion worth of U.S. Humvees.
I've introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, legislation that would stop our government from using taxpayer dollars to directly or indirectly support groups who are allied with and supporting terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in their war to overthrow the Syrian government. The fact that our resources are being used to strengthen the very terrorist groups we should be focused on defeating should alarm every American.
The difficulty now is the economic part of the war. Syrians are struggling terribly due to sanctions. Because of the sanctions, there's not that much that you can do there. Nobody has a credit card. They can't have any kind of outside banking accounts. Email accounts are difficult to access. It's unimaginable, the difficulty that the people go through.
That set of sanctions, means that the Syrian people cannot get medicines that they desperately need. They cannot get factory parts that they need to maintain their economy. They can't get infant formula and many other things. Their students cannot go abroad. Their lawyers are separated from the rest of the international legal system because of those sanctions. These sanctions are not reported in the U.S. media, to my knowledge, and we need to know about them.
As an American citizen, it is shameful for me to admit what my government is doing in the sovereign country of Syria. We have no right to impose these illegal sanctions. In fact, these sanctions, allegedly, the government says are against the government of Syria. But in fact, it's against the people, civil society, people who are attempting to maintain the infrastructure, the health care, the safety of all Syrian people. One of the things that stood out to me is not only the lack of medication and the fact that Syrian children are dying because they can't get chemotherapy meds into the country because of the illegal sanctions that the U.S. and the West has imposed. Also, they're not allowing parts and material to get to businesses who are trying to maintain. And they're trying to maintain for more than one reason, and not just to continue to make money, but to employ people. Because when people have no way to earn a living, they become desperate. And we know that some of the Syrian people who may have chosen to join the terrorists, mostly for economic reasons, because they couldn't earn a living. And their benefactors, the U.S. and all the others who are collaborating together to fund this terrorism, are paying people very well to participate in this illegal activity against the Syrian people. So there are so many ways, subtle ways, that the U.S. sanctions are affecting the Syrians. And when we spoke to the business people, they mentioned to us, we're desperately trying to stay in business. We're desperately trying to keep our people employed so they don't become desperate and they don't then feel like they have no other choice.
On Monday, there was a terrible earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria. It was a 7.8 on the Richter scale, a shallow earthquake that was very damaging. It has hit Syria's second largest city, Aleppo, and done enormous damage and created many, many casualties. The Biden administration has sent aid to Turkey, has reached out to them, has aid workers going there. However, the United States State Department chose this time of death and suffering to make a very, very antagonistic statement towards the people of Syria. I have never seen such barbaric response to a tragedy where you literally have people in Aleppo City, Syria, who are looking up at piles of concrete. Their lives are coming to an end. They're freezing in the cold, and they're there without food, without water, and they're dying. And meanwhile, the State Department takes that opportunity to reemphasize the fact that we are bitter because we could not impose our will on the Syrian people.
I would say there was a small percentage of people who really knew what was going on. And, thank God these people never stopped speaking up in so many different ways. But overwhelmingly, most of the world was lied to.
Working it
What is your message tonight for America?
I advise the American people to follow independent journalists that are in Syria. Like, for an example, Vanessa Bailey, she's doing a great job. Like yourself, you're doing a great job. I really appreciate you coming to Syria so you can see what is happening face to face.
Yeah. It's your boy Treka on the mic. Far away from comedy, it's time to talk about this human tragedy. Are you ready? Living in Damascus City, where the life is shitty, where the girls are pretty, and my life's a pity, where life is tough and rough, and I've had enough of seeing my nation go through the situation. 10 years of war, and I can't take it no more. My future is blur. Will I die poor, or will I be free from this misery? It's still a mystery. If you ask me now, war zone is where I fucking live, where bombs fall daily, like it's fucking raining. I'm blaming politics and religion. I would flying shit on both if I was a pigeon. Listen, I hope the song blows up like a suicide bomber funded by Obama. Trauma is what we had to go through. To all the warmongers out there, fuck you. Living in Damascus City, where the life is shitty, where the girls are pretty, and my life's a pity, where life is tough and rough, and I've had enough of seeing my nation go through the situation. 10 years of war, and I can't take it no more. My future is blur. Will I die poor, or will I be free from this misery? It's still a mystery, if you ask me. We got ISIS army, Qaeda army, Nusra army, Hezbollah army, Kurdish army, Turkish army, Russian army, American army. Will they harm me? I don't know. Will they kill me? I don't know. Will I find a way out of this shit show? I hope so. On top of that, we got economic sanctions, so no embassies and no companies and no nothing coming from the overseas. They wanna see us on our knees while we living on ease. Unemployment rate is higher than Snoop Dogg. It's very hard to find a good paying job. Every Syrian has to work 2 to 3 jobs. The salaries are low while the prices are high. Did I mention you can't even make money online? Cause MasterCard and PayPal for a Syrian is a crime. So no matter how hard the poor Syrian tries, he'll either live his life broke or get lucky and die. Say what? Say what? Say what? He'll either live his life broke or get lucky and die. Say what? Say what? Say what? He'll either live his life broke or get lucky and die. Say what? Say what? Say what? Say what? He'll either live his life or get lucky and die. Say what? Say what? Say what? He'll either live his life broke. I'm gonna leave this place one way or another. Although I'm gonna miss my parents, friends, and brother, but I'll be back just like the Terminator. But something tells me I was destined for something greater. I don't wanna waste my life in this prison. It's time I get my life together and make a decision with precision and find a way out. With a little help and luck, it's gonna work out. I'd rather be ambitious than stay in this vicious cycle that has been nothing but malicious. A man with a dream that is on a mission. Nothing can distract me from my tunnel vision. It's Treka. You better remember the name. You're gonna witness what I'm about to do to this game. I'm gonna make the world come hear my voice, because dying for free will never be my choice. Living in Damascus City, where the life is shitty, where the girls are pretty, and my life's a pity, where life is tough and rough, and I've had enough of seeing my nation go through the situation. 10 years of war, and I can't take it no more. My future is blur. Will I die poor, or will I be free from this misery? It's really up to me, if you ask me.